How are you guys doing? It's great to be here in the Bitcoin capital. BTC Prague is an incredible conference. It's my first time here. Big shout out to the organizers and the entire team. Thank you guys for having me. I'm Frank King, the YouTuber behind the CryptoSnake channel, where we've been publishing educational content since 2018. I'm a Bitcoiner. And a couple of years ago, I started looking into the potential quantum threat, mainly for myself. I wanted to understand the real risks to my own holdings. The deeper I went into research papers and expert discussions, the more I realized this is something more people should at least have a basic understanding of. Let me start with a quick disclaimer. Everything I'll share today is based on publicly available data, research papers, and my conversations with experts on both sides of this topic. In today's keynote, I'll walk through 3 possible scenarios of how a potential Q-day could play out for Bitcoin. And of course, I'll credit all the experts and sources as we go. Let's start with the basics. Classical computers versus quantum computers. Let me ask, how many of you have a basic understanding of what a quantum computer is and how it works? Raise your hands. All right, for those who don't, let's do a quick comparison. A classical computer uses bits. Bits have 2 states, 0 or 1. They're always in one state at a time. Every file on your phone or laptop is just a combination of zeros and ones. If a classical computer is trying to brute force a simple password like BTC Prague, and the attacker knows it's exactly 10 characters using a 53-character set, you're looking at around 170 quadrillion possible combinations. On average, you'd need to try about half of those combinations. That's because a classical computer has to check possibilities step by step. Even with parallel processing, the problem still grows exponentially. Now let's compare that to a quantum computer. A quantum computer uses qubits. Qubits are different because they can exist in superposition. That means they're not fixed as 0 or 1. They exist in a combination of both states at the same time. For instance, a qubit could behave like it's 90% likely to be 0 and 10% likely to be 1 when measured. But that's only part of the story. Qubits can also become entangled, meaning the state of one qubit is directly connected to another, even across distance. This allows quantum systems to process information in a highly coordinated way. Instead of checking every possible answer, a quantum computer uses interference to increase the probability of correct answers and reduce the wrong ones. You can think of it as a system that leans toward the right answer. Now there is a big catch. Qubits are extremely fragile. They lose their quantum state through a process called decoherence. Basically, interaction with the environment destroys the information. That's why error correction is one of the biggest challenges in the quantum field today. To solve this, scientists combine many physical qubits into what are called logical qubits. They use advanced materials, cryogenic systems, and even AI to stabilize computations. As these systems improve, the idea of quantum computers becoming capable of breaking today's cryptography becomes more realistic. This is obviously a simplified explanation of a very complex topic. But the key takeaway is this. A quantum computer approaches problems in a completely different way. And that difference is what could eventually challenge the cryptographic systems we rely on today. Now let's talk about Bitcoin security. Bitcoin signatures use something called ECDSA, which stands for Elliptic Curve Digital Signature Algorithm. And it operates on the SECP 256K1 curve. Bitcoin also supports Schnorr signatures introduced as part of the 2021 Taproot soft fork, which also rely on the same SECP 256K1 curve. Both ECDSA and Schnorr signatures are used to sign and verify Bitcoin transactions. For a classical computer, deriving a private key from its public key, whether it's ECDSA or Schnorr, is practically impossible. But that changes once a powerful enough quantum computer can run Shor's algorithm. And that's where the real discussion begins. Among experts, there is an ongoing debate not just about when a potential Q-day could happen, but also whether it will happen within a meaningful time frame. There are still open questions. How powerful would a quantum computer need to be to break these systems? What would a real-world attack actually look like? And most importantly, how should we prepare for it? In this talk, I won't go deep into common misconceptions or explain why Bitcoin might be considered an easier target than banking or military systems. I think we all here understand the difference between centralized systems controlled by a single authority and a decentralized network that requires consensus. What I do want to focus on is the Bitcoin risk surface. How many Bitcoins are actually exposed to a potential quantum attack? One of the most cited pieces of research on this comes from Project 11. According to their estimates, around 6.9 million Bitcoins could be vulnerable under certain conditions, roughly 1/3 of the total supply. This includes early Satoshi era coins that use formats like P2PK, pay to public key, as well as coins from reused addresses, where the public key has already been revealed. And this is a very important point. Most Bitcoin today is not immediately exposed to this type of quantum risk. With modern address formats like native SegWit, your public key isn't revealed until you actually spend your coins. So in simple terms, move your coins to a fresh address and don't spend. Now let's look at a Google research paper that was released a couple of months ago, titled Securing Elliptic Curve Cryptocurrencies Against Quantum Vulnerabilities, the famous one. This paper matters because it significantly lowers the estimated resources needed to make a quantum computer cryptographically relevant for elliptic curve systems like the one Bitcoin uses. The researchers estimate that breaking SecP to 56K1 curve could require as few as 1,200 fault-tolerant logical qubits in one version of the attack, or around 1,450 in another. It also introduces an important distinction between two types of quantum attacks. The first is an at-rest attack. That means coins are already sitting in a state where the public key is revealed, so the attacker has plenty of time. The second is an unspent attack. That means the public key is revealed when a transaction is broadcast, and the attacker tries to derive the private key before that transaction is confirmed. The paper argues that under fast quantum architectures, an unspent attack could happen within roughly the same time window as Bitcoin's average block interval, around 9 to 12 minutes. So now the risk is no longer limited to all Bitcoins that have already exposed their public keys. Pending transactions could eventually become part of the threat model as well. Now let's look at another important piece of research that adds a different perspective. This one comes from Caltech and a quantum startup called Oratomic, and it was published in March 2026. It focuses on a different type of quantum architecture called neutral atom quantum computing. Instead of using superconducting circuits like Google, this approach uses individual atoms controlled with lasers to act as qubits. And here's why this matters. The researchers suggest that a quantum computer capable of running Shor's algorithm could require as few as 10,000 physical qubits, which is significantly lower than many earlier estimates. And that's a big shift in the conversation, because for a long time, people were talking about millions of qubits. Now we're seeing credible research points into numbers that are much lower. But there is an important trade-off. In this model, the system is slower. Instead of breaking elliptic curve cryptography in minutes, the estimates suggest an attack on encryption could take about 10 days, using roughly 26,000 qubits, depending on the setup and level of parallelization. So compared to the Google paper, this is a very different type of risk. Not a fast real-time attack on transactions, but more of a slow, targeted attack where an attacker focuses on specific wallets over time. And that changes the picture again, because it suggests the first generation of cryptographically relevant quantum computers may not arrive as one sudden Q-day event. Instead, we could see gradual capability, different architectures reaching different thresholds at different speeds. Some faster, some slower, some targeting transactions in real time, others targeting exposed keys over longer time frames. Now, with all of this research on the table, the Google paper lowering resource estimates and the Caltech work showing more efficient architectures, it's clear The conversation is evolving fast. But it's also easy to misread what that actually means. Lower estimates on paper do not automatically translate into real-world capability. So let's look at the first scenario, the optimistic one. In this scenario, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is not a near-term reality. We are talking at least a decade away and possibly much longer. There are respected voices in the Bitcoin space who support this view. People like Michael Saylor and Adam Back. Shout out to both legends. They will both be speaking here at the conference. I'll briefly focus on Adam Back's perspective because he has been very consistent on this topic. His view is simple. Quantum computing is progressing, but the threat to Bitcoin is not imminent. And his reasoning comes down to engineering, not theory. Yes, recent research suggests that breaking elliptic curve cryptography may require fewer qubits than many people once thought. But those estimates still assume something we do not have today, a fault-tolerant quantum computer that actually works at scale. Today's quantum systems operate with thousands of noisy physical qubits. But to run Shor's algorithm in practice, you need stable logical qubits built on top of heavy error correction. And right now, we do not have anything close to that. Dr. Beck has made this point clearly. You cannot take a noisy quantum system, run it thousands of times, and expect to recover a Bitcoin private key. He also points to something we've seen repeatedly. Quantum timelines often sleep. What looks very close in theory can take far longer in practice. So yes, while the research is real, the engineering gap is still very large. At the same time, this is not being ignored. Blockstream Research and others are actively working on post-quantum signature schemes. That includes hash-based constructions like shrinks and shrimps. For example, the shrinks proposal uses a 324-byte signature, which is larger than today's 64-byte Schnorr signature, but still manageable. They have already implemented and successfully tested post-quantum signature verification on Liquid, Bitcoin's layer 2. So, if Adam Back and major AI platforms are right on the timeline, then in this scenario, quantum computing does not break Bitcoin in the near future. It gives Bitcoin time to upgrade. Yes, as you can see, the collective AI consensus gives this optimistic future around 65% probability. I've added this slide just for fun. Obviously, no one knows what's going to happen in the future. Second, let's look at the moderate impact case. In this scenario, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer arrives much sooner than the skeptics expect, likely within the next 2.5 to 9 years. And this isn't just theory. The US government officially recommends migrating to quantum-resistant cryptography by 2035. Many experts think that's too optimistic. For instance, the Google team points toward the end of this decade, around 2029. And Google's timeline is also backed by Pierre-Luc Delaire-Demers, a PhD in quantum physics. I reached out to Pierre-Luc to get a reality check on scaling, and his answer was direct. The quantum industry is in the era of scaling very large machines, and those will reach cryptographically relevant quantum computer scale around 2029, 2031. So in this scenario, the Bitcoin community is forced to find a consensus, fast. The challenge isn't just the math, it is the social layer. We still have to decide how to handle the legacy Satoshi coins. Do we burn them, use them as a quantum canary, or implement a forced delay? As a potential solution for this scenario, we have BIP360 proposed by Hunter Beast and his team. It introduces pay-to-Merkle root, P2MR, which removes the vulnerable key-pass span of Taproot. BIP360 was recently merged into the official Bitcoin BIPs repository, and the first P2MR transaction was successfully demonstrated on testnet earlier this year. BIP360 is not just a theoretical concept. It is a real engineering solution that would require a soft fork. So if Pierre-Luc Delaire-Demers and the Google team are right on the timeline, then in this scenario, Bitcoin has a narrow but manageable window to upgrade before the quantum threat is live. The collective AI consensus gives this scenario around 35% probability. That brings us to the final scenario, the critical impact case. In this version, the impossible happens. Bitcoin is effectively compromised tomorrow. If we woke up to a quantum snipe mempool, we would have to rely entirely on the tools we have right now. But the toolbox isn't empty. For instance, we have Evulev's QSB method. It uses hash-based puzzles that fit right into today's scripts. It is expensive, around $150 in GPU power per spend, but it requires zero consensus. It is the ultimate emergency lifeboat. We have Mara in its slipstream. We have some other tools. We have dozens of people actively working on solving this hypothetical problem. So even if a powerful quantum computer appears tomorrow, it will not be the end. Yes, it will be a period of chaos, probably a temporary dip until something like BIP 360 is activated. But Bitcoin will survive. I was thinking about how to wrap this up, and the best idea I had was to share my personal 3-step plan. The strategy I'm following until Bitcoin fully transitions to a post-quantum standard. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, AI gives that pessimistic scenario an almost 0% probability. So back to my 3 steps. Step 1, get off the risk list. I've already moved my coins to fresh and exposed addresses. I do not reuse addresses, and I don't spend from my long-term storage. So even if a powerful quantum computer appears tomorrow, my coins aren't the easiest target. Step 2, spread the word. Not to create panic, and definitely not to spread FUD. I do this because I believe the more we speak about a potential quantum threat, especially at conferences like this, the more smart people will get involved, and the better chance we have to reach a consensus. Step 3, keep stacking. In the optimistic scenario, I buy because the quantum threat is still distant, which is bullish. In the moderate scenario, I buy because the ecosystem is awake and building solutions, which is also bullish. And in the critical scenario, I'm buying the dip heavily. I remember the 2020 COVID crash and the aggressive V-shaped recovery that followed. Fear creates the ultimate opportunity for people who actually understand what they own. I hope you guys understand what you own. Bitcoin's future is bright. Thank you so much for your time.